Today I'm painting this picture in Procreate. Hi everyone, Steve Elliott here again. I'm doing an oil painting today in Procreate. I went to a garden centre at the weekend, and if you're from the UK and you live in the East Midlands, it's called the 6 Acre Nurseries, and I was blown away. It was only tiny, it wasn't a very big garden centre, but the folks there were really, really nice, very laid back, very knowledgeable. And these two guys in the photo were the actual gardeners at the garden centre taking a break. So I was sat at a table having a cup of coffee, and I sneaked a picture of them. And then later on, when I got talking to him, I says, "Can I do a painting?" And the guy with the flower in his hat says, "Yeah, sure, go for it. My wife's a painter." So straight away we hit it off, and we had chats about plants and stuff like that. So it was a really nice afternoon, and when I got home I wanted to paint this. But if you look at the photo, what I didn't want was all of those bags of stones and chippings and that car in the background. So I decided to I don't know what's happening looking at that face. I wasn't really going for a realistic face at this point, I don't think. Anyway, I didn't want all of this detail in the background, so I decided to just invent something and put some colour on. It was, I've never been to a garden centre like it, because it was like in the centre of a small wood. There was all these huge trees all the way around it that surrounded it, that left lots of nice shaded areas. And it almost seemed like a secret garden centre that was tucked away in the middle of nowhere. And I really liked it. So I wanted to get that impression in the painting. So that's why I went for this sort of just green foliage in the background. And I also put sort of a bench behind them that they're leaning up against. You can just see that there. And that was for, if you went into the garden centre, you would see benches like that with plants sat on. Not benches, trellises, I suppose is a better word. Sat on. Sorry, that they got plants sat on. And that's what that's sort of emulating, I guess. And two real cool looking guys, I thought. Really smooth. This bloke looked awesome with his flower in his hat, and they're all wearing sort of khaki camouflage clothes. And the guy with the beard, the big bushy beard, said to me that there's lots of rapeseed fields nearby, and they've just harvested all the rape. So all the bugs that would be living in the rapeseed have sort of just left the rape fields and are now just falling down on top of this garden centre, or coming to the garden centre. And if you wear any bright clothes at all, you will just be absolutely covered in bugs. So that's why they wear the camouflage clothes, so they don't get pestered by the bugs. I didn't know that. I bet Bushcraft on Fire, a guy that follows me, and he's got his own YouTube channel as well. I bet he knows about the bugs landing on bright coloured clothes and stuff like that. But I didn't, because essentially I'm a townie, and I don't venture too far away from I don't know if you could call it civilization, but from where us people live. Anyway, I'm diversifying, getting off the subject. I said getting off the subject because I don't really know what diversifying means. I think it means that. So it's not that I'm sort of explaining stuff to people. Anyway, what I did, I painted this background, and then I waffled for a little bit and talked about rubbish and stuff, and now I'm back on it, and I painted the two guys on a separate layer. So I've got two layers, I believe I've got one three layers, one with a sort of a ground grey colour on, then one with the background on, and that was painted with a turpentine brush to get those sort of oily brush strokes. And then when I went into painting the two guys, I used my two custom brushes, the big blocking in brush and then the fine oil painting brush for all of the detail work. And I worked them up side by side. You notice I've got a different photo for the guy on the right to the original photo. The original photo is actually got that ice lolly in his mouth, and I preferred the photo with him holding it. So I've used two photos, and you'll see me flipping between the two for the two characters. And then I also, a bit later on, I decided to add a foreground, and I brought in some more photos. So the thing here is, what I've done, I've taken something I like out of a photo and discarded everything that is of no interest to me, i.e. the cars and the gravel. I made up a background, and then I used two composite photos, two separate photos for the two characters, and you'll see I used two more photos a bit later on for the foreground. So you don't have to just paint, if you're using photos, you don't have to just paint what's on the photo. If you've got an idea in your head of the subject that you want to portray, and it doesn't match your photo, you can just use bits of the photo it's just a reference. It's the two guys that really fascinated me. As soon as I saw them, I thought, oh, these two look real cool characters, and I wanted to paint them. And then that was when I was at the garden centre, and when I got home, I then formulated in my head what I wanted the picture to look like. So at this point, I was really happy with it, and again I'm working over the old painting. I did both the two characters quite. There you see the guy with the ice lolly in his mouth. I didn't like that as much as him just holding it. So I've lost my track now. Oh yeah, I painted both the guys in quite loose and almost finished them. And then if you see the arms now and the hands, they're very, very loose. It could be a finished painting at this stage, but I thought it looked a bit cartoon-like, and I wanted to get a lot more detail in there. So I went and over-painted it again, and sort of almost painted another picture on top of my original painting. And here you can see, at this point, this is where I'm now refining everything and sort of getting the colours right. I see I'm working on that flower, and I make that pop a little bit more. And I work a lot because I struggled with his nose. He's got like this big bulbous nose thing going off here. And in the end, I resolved it. I decided, because it was difficult to see on the photo. You can see it's not very clear. The nose merges into the cheek, and it almost looks like a great big bulbous nose. But I did overcome that by putting a highlight on his nose a bit later on. You can see I'm sort of working away at it, thinking, what is wrong with this? I just can't quite seem to get it right. But I kept working at it. This is a nice tip. You notice how I have the close-up next to it, and quite often I will size what I'm painting to be the same size as the photo, and that way it becomes a lot easier. There you go, you see, it becomes a lot easier to judge if you've got proportions and scale correct. So I'm sort of going in and making the ear actually look like an ear, and not the sort of blob of wax that was stuck on him before. I don't know if I've done the glasses justice, because they were sort of really those sort of polarized lenses that was sort of multi-coloured and refracting all different shades of light. So I don't know as if I got that bang on, but I was working with a limited palette. This I I've used the Pissarro palette. I think that's how I pronounce it. Yeah, the Pissarro, Camille Pissarro colour palette that I used for the painting in his style. I've used that palette because it was very green, and I thought it would work well. It sort of got these muted greens in as well for the camouflage, and I'm really happy with the colour scheme and the tones of the colours. I think they look really well balanced. I'm quite chuffed with that. So here I'm now in on the second character. So I've swapped photos again, and I'm just sort of working on detail and just sort of fine-tuning the face somewhat and getting lots of highlights in here. This painting again is all about the light, and I wanted some really bright tones or highlights of where the light's sort of catching the clothes and the faces. And it's amazing what a difference bright sunlight makes to a fabric that's almost, you know, it's a dark grey, it's not black, but with the light on it, it almost appears white. It's a very pale grey. So you can really bump up the contrast. And sometimes I think people are a bit scared to do that. And I think it's what really makes a painting. When you get those bright highlights in there, that's what makes it pop. And you look on the beard there, that all of a sudden that's given the beard dimension. Before it was looking a bit flat, but now it all of a sudden it's got a bit of shape. I'll tell you what, it was a hot day. He made a good call getting that ice lolly to cool himself off a bit. I like the colours, the skin tones that was in this palette as well, because considering the Pissarro painting I did, there was no real people in it. I think they've made quite nice skin tones and quite realistic, well tanned gardeners. So I kind of like this painting at this stage. I'm still working on the detail on the hands. I wanted the hands to look, you know, look well formed, and I like the way his arms sort of resting on his knee, and you've got that sort of shortening of perspective and everything. So I was really pleased with that. But I was thinking at this point, the painting almost looks like a study rather than a painting. So I wanted to add something to it. So I was sort of just putting the finishing touches on the hands here when I was painting it, and sort of putting shadows under his leg, and just sort of getting the form of the shapes a little bit more clearly. And then I had an idea that I thought, right, okay, I want something in the foreground. I want these two guys to be framed by something. So I decided to put some plants in. And I used well, basically what I went into my garden, took a couple of plant pots, stuck them in the sun, pointed them so I got all the shadows that go in the same way, and took a couple of photos of them. Anyway, that is the end of my gardener's tea break painting. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, a thumbs up would be much appreciated. Helps me out a lot. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, because I have lots of videos like this, and I would love to be sharing them with you. So hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.